Hi everyone, welcome to the video. My name is Jess and I'm the designer behind the Sweater Collective patterns and tutorials. Today I'm going to be showing you how to crochet your very own project bag. I was inspired to make this bag after finding some unloved cotton yarn in my stash and deciding to crochet something nice and simple but very usable out of it. If you're new to crochet, don't worry. It's easy to make this bag as it only requires a few basic stitches. And once it's finished, you can use your new bag to carry around whatever other craft projects you're working on. The free pattern instructions for this bag can be found on my website, and I'll leave a direct link to that in the description box below, so make sure to grab those instructions and then follow along with me. To make this bag, you're going to need cotton yarn in a DK weight, a crochet hook. I used a 3.5mm or US size E or 4 hook, scissors, a tapestry needle, lockable stitch markers, and some rope or ribbon for your drawstring. Let's get into the demonstration. This bag is mostly worked in the round from the bottom up. We're going to start by making a magic ring, which will end up in the center of the bag space. For a magic ring, we take our yarn. I'm using the color that I'd like the entire bottom section of my bag to be worked in, and hold the tail in our left hand and a bit further along the same length of yarn with our right hand. Then bring the left hand around behind the right hand to cross the yarn over itself and form a ring below. Pinch the yarn together to hold the ring in place, and then get comfortable with your hook and working yarn. I hold my crochet hook in my right hand and the working yarn in my left hand like this. Then we're going to insert our crochet hook into the middle of the ring and wrap the working yarn around the head of the hook. Just a quick note if you're a knitter, when we crochet we wrap our yarn in the opposite direction to knitting. So we need to come up over the top of the hook and then around beneath it like this, kind of like we're making a reverse yarn over. We're going to use the head of our hook to catch the yarn and bring it through the ring to make a secure loop on the hook. Wrap the working yarn around the head of the crochet hook again and use the head of the hook to bring this closest yarn through the further loop on the hook. We've just made a chain stitch. This chain 1 is going to help keep our ring in place while we now make our first stitches in round 1 of our pattern instructions. I'm going to use US crochet terms throughout this project, which are different to UK terms. So we'll be making what in US terms are called single crochet stitches. To make a single crochet, we insert our hook back into the middle of the ring again, wrap our working yarn around the hook, and bring the hook through the ring to the front. Then wrap the yarn around the hook again. From here, I'm just going to call this action a yarn over, and use the head of the hook to draw this closest loop through both of the 2 further loops on the hook, so there's only 1 loop remaining. There's our very first single crochet stitch. Let's make 7 more for a total of 8 stitches. So insert the hook into the ring, yarn over, bring the hook through the ring to the front, yarn over, draw this loop of yarn through the 2 further loops on the hook. That's our second single crochet. Insert the hook into the ring, yarn over, bring the hook through the ring, yarn over, draw this loop through the further 2 loops. Our third single crochet. Keep repeating those steps until we get to our 8 stitches. Okay, I now have 8 single crochet stitches and I can double check that number by inspecting my work. Back here, this little V that looks kind of like a link in a chain is that first chain stitch I made. And then if we look past that at the top of our work, we have a line of horizontal V's, and each of those indicates 1 single crochet stitch. So we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we therefore have the correct number. Now I'm going to close up my magic ring to create a seamless look. We grab our tail end of yarn and pull on it. And we should see that the more we pull, the more it cinches our stitches together and closes up the hole. There's a slight chance that the hole could open up again as we're crocheting, but when we later weave in all our tails, that will stop it from opening. From here, we're going to keep crocheting in the round, working in a spiral fashion, and we'll increase the size of this circle outwards by slowly adding more and more stitches. For round 2, I'm going to skip my chain and insert my crochet hook under the back leg of the first V that indicates my single crochet stitches. Most of the time in crochet, you're actually meant to insert your needle under both legs of each V, and we'll be having a go at that a bit later on. But throughout the base and body of the bag, we're going to be doing back loop only crochet, which will give our fabric a particular look and also make it a little more flowy and drapey. Alright, so let's insert our hook under just the back leg of the V and then yarn over with the working yarn. Bring the hook through under the leg again, so we now have 2 loops on the hook. Then yarn over and draw this loop through the further 2 loops on the hook. There's our first single crochet of the second round. Before I make my next stitch, I'm going to take one of my lockable stitch markers and attach it to the top of the stitch I just made. This is going to tell me which is the first stitch of my round because it's tricky to find that point when we're working in a spiral. I highly recommend that wherever you're having trouble counting or keeping your place in your crochet project, add stitch markers and they'll be a lifesaver. Now we can make our second stitch, and we're going to increase here by making our second stitch in the same place we made our first stitch. So insert your hook under the back leg of the same V as before. Then yarn over, bring the hook through to the front again, yarn over, and draw this loop through the furthest 2 loops. We'll move to the next V for our third stitch. Insert the hook under the back leg of that next V, yarn over, bring the hook to the front of our work again, yarn over, and draw this loop through the furthest 2 loops. And we need to add another stitch again by inserting the hook under the back leg of the same V, then yarn over, bring the hook to the front of the work again, yarn over, draw this loop through the furthest 2 loops on the hook. So in our pattern, this direction is where we're single crocheting twice in each stitch, these being the single crochets of the previous round. And that takes our stitch count from 8 in the first round to 16 in the second round. Continue making 2 single crochet stitches in the back leg of every V until you reach your beginning of round marker. I recommend double checking your stitch counts here and throughout the pattern because it's so much easier to fix mistakes if we catch them early. I know that the horizontal V marked with a stitch marker was the first single crochet I made of round 2. So if we count all the V's after that, I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, which is perfect. We're now up to round 3 of the pattern, and in this round my instructions say to SC in the next stitch, then SC twice in next stitch, and these instructions are in parentheses, which means I repeat them the instructed number of times, and my pattern says to work them 8 times, which will take me to the end of the round. The first single crochet is done into our first stitch of the round, and I'm going to take my marker off so it's out of the way, then make a single crochet into the top back leg of that previous stitch. And now I'm going to put my marker on the top of the stitch I just made to still indicate my first stitch of the round, but move it up to this current round. Now I need to SC twice in the next stitch. I make 1 SC, Then make another SC into the same place. And now I'll keep repeating my SC next stitch, SC twice in next stitch. So SC, then SC twice in the next stitch, SC, then SC twice in the next stitch. With the way we're putting in additional stitches in this round, we're also going to increase 8 stitches. So hopefully when we get to the end, we'll find that we have 24 stitches. When you get to the end of your round, I'd again recommend counting your stitches like I showed you before. I've already done that and I know that I have 24 stitches. So we're up to round 4. In this round, we again begin with an SC in the next stitch. I'll do that in my first stitch and then pop my marker on top of my new stitch. Then SC twice in the next stitch, again 2. And now our next instructions are in parentheses, so that's what we'll be repeating. These instructions say to SC in next 2 stitches, then SC twice in next stitch. That means we need to work a single crochet in the next stitch, then a single crochet in the stitch after that, and now work 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Then again, single crochet in the next stitch, single crochet in the stitch after that, then single crochet twice into the same stitch. We'll keep repeating that 7 times in total. Here are my 7 repeats, which are easiest to count if you identify where you single crocheted twice in the same stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I have 1 stitch remaining in the round and then my beginning of round marker. In this last stitch, we're just going to work another simple SC. Double check your stitch count and you should find that you've now got 32 stitches in your circle. Round 5 has instructions in parentheses straight away, so we know we're going to be repeating those instructions. And the instructions are to SC in next 3 stitches, SC twice in next stitch. So we work 3 individual single crochet stitches. Then single crochet twice into the same stitch. Work 3 separate single crochet stitches. Then single crochet twice into the same stitch. And repeat that 8 times in total, which should take you to the end of the round, and we should then have 40 stitches. Hopefully you can see that there's a lot of repetition in our instructions, and all we're doing is adding 8 new stitches every round and alternating between increase points around the circle. This gives us a nice smooth circle around the circumference and also makes a really pretty spiral pattern on the base of the bag. Round 6 asks us to SC in next 2 stitches. So we make 2 separate single crochet stitches. Then SC twice in the next stitch, which creates an increase. Then we SC in the next 4 stitches, so work a single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. And then SC twice in the next stitch to again increase. Keep repeating the SC in next 4 stitches, SC twice in next stitch for a total of 7 times, and you should find that you then have 2 stitches remaining in the round. Then work a single crochet into each of those last stitches. And we should now have 48 stitches in total. From here, you'll be okay to work through the remainder of the base instructions. Just check your stitch counts carefully throughout, and remember that if the pattern says to single crochet a certain number of stitches, you make each of those single crochets into separate stitches of the previous round. If the pattern says to SC twice in the next stitch, that means you're making 2 single crochet stitches into the same stitch, and that's adding a new stitch to your count each time. If you make a mistake, it's very easy to pull back your work. Just slip any loops around your hook off of the hook, then pull on your yarn to undo as many stitches as you need to backtrack. Then try to have a complete stitch remaining with the loop coming out the top of it, and pop that loop back onto your crochet hook, orientating the loop so that the adjustable leg is sitting at the front and the fixed leg is sitting at the back. Then you can continue crocheting. If you run out of yarn, you'll need to add in a new ball. To do this, make sure you still have a tail of yarn remaining of the old yarn that can be woven in later. And then work a single crochet stitch up to the point where you would make your final yarn over of the stitch. Then make this final yarn over with your new yarn and draw this loop through the furthest 2 loops. And then keep crocheting with the new yarn only. When you've worked all 18 rounds of the bag base, you should have a circle that looks like this and have 144 stitches in total. From here, our project gets even easier because we'll just keep single crocheting in each stitch of every round without adding any more increases. This will draw our fabric up into a wall that forms the body of the bag. I like to leave a stitch marker in the front leg of the first stitch I worked after the completed base, and this will help me count how many rounds of the bag body I've worked. So I make my first stitch, place the marker into the front leg at the top of the new stitch, and then just single crochet once in each stitch of the round. Now I'm going to leave this marker here, make my first stitch of the next round, and grab another marker to place in the top of this stitch, which means I have one marker showing me where the body of the bag started, and one marker that I'll keep moving up every round to always show me where my beginning of round is. We keep crocheting until we've worked 24 rounds of single crochet, and I'll show you how to count. Each ridge here marks a round worked. So here's our first ridge marked with the stitch marker, and then we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And I've stopped one stitch before the end of my final round because I'm going to show you how I like to change colours relatively seamlessly. This is optional, but how I like to do it is I work until one stitch before my pattern says I need to change colour. And then just like how I added in a new ball of yarn, I'll work the next stitch up until my final yarn over. Then grab my next colour and make the final yarn over with that yarn instead. And complete the single crochet stitch. And then for my first stitch of the next round, I'm going to make a slip stitch rather than a single crochet stitch. So insert the crochet hook into the back leg of the next stitch, yarn over, and bring the hook back to the front of the work. Then draw the yarn over through the furthest loop on the hook. This makes a shorter stitch than our single crochets and helps to hide our colour change a little. And you can cut your old yarn, leaving a tail to weave in later. Now this counts as my first stitch of the round, so I'll pop my marker on it. And then if you're working a colour blocked version of the bag, you're going to keep working in single crochet for another 36 rounds. If you'd like to make a striped bag, you'll keep working in single crochet for another 6 rounds. Then do this colour change again to swap to your third colour, and keep working 6 rounds of each colour, then making a colour change for 6 stripes in total. Our bag is nearly finished, and hopefully now you're feeling confident about making single crochet stitches and working in the round. So here we're just going to double check how many rounds we've worked, and I'm doing the colour blocked version, so I should have 36 rounds of colour B. I can count up the number of ridges from this clear colour change. So 1, 2, 3, etc. And I've already counted and know that I have 36 rounds. By the way, this bag is completely adjustable to your preferences, and you can work more or less rounds in each section to make a smaller or larger bag if you prefer. I'm now going to fasten off my work by making another slip stitch. So insert the hook into the next stitch, yarn over, bring the hook back to the front of the work, and draw the yarn over through the furthest loop. And then I'll pull my remaining loop nice and big, Then cut my yarn, leaving a tail to weave in later. Now we're going to make the drawstring channels that are at the top of our bag, and these are going to be worked flat in half double crochet stitches. For our first channel, we'll start by skipping the first 36 stitches of the round. It doesn't really matter if you want to count this slip stitch as your first stitch or not, but I'm going to count it, and skipping stitches is going to rotate our colour change point so that it's hiding at the back of our bag. So count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. until you get to 36. That's 36, so this is my 37th stitch. I'm going to insert my hook into the back leg of that stitch so I don't lose my place, and then grab my colour B. I'll yarn over with colour B and bring the hook to the front of my work again, then yarn over and draw it through the furthest loop on the hook. That's made a chain 1. We need to chain 2, so yarn over again and draw the yarn through the now furthest loop on the hook. There's our completed chain 2. From here, we're going to be making half double crochet stitches. These require one more step than our single crochet stitches, and that makes a slightly taller stitch. So for a half double crochet, I'm going to start by making a yarn over. And then I'll insert my hook beneath the back leg of the next stitch. Yarn over and bring the hook to the front of the work again. Then make one more yarn over and draw this yarn over through the 3 furthest loops I have on the hook so that there's only one loop remaining. To make the next half double crochet, again start with a yarn over, then insert the hook, yarn over, bring the hook to the front again, yarn over and draw this yarn through the 3 furthest loops on the hook. So we're just adding one more loop than what we had during our single crochet stitches, and that extra loop means more yarn, and more yarn equals a bigger stitch. Again, yarn over, insert the hook, yarn over, bring the hook to the front, yarn over, draw the yarn over through the furthest 3 loops. Keep making half double crochet stitches until you have 71 in total, and the chain 2 we made at the start is going to count as our 72nd stitch. Now turn your work because we're going to be working back and forth in rows rather than continuing in the round. We need to start this row by making something called a turning chain, and it's basically what we did at the start of the previous row 2, where we chained 2 and it counted as our first half double crochet stitch. So yarn over and draw this yarn over through the furthest loop on the hook, that's 1 chain, and again yarn over, draw this yarn over through the furthest loop on the hook, and that's 2 chain. From here on in, we're going to crochet into both loops of every stitch, rather than just the back loops, as it looks a bit nicer when crocheting flat. Working flat crochet can be a bit tricky because at the start of the row it can be difficult to see where our hook needs to be inserted. As mentioned, the turning chain that I just made is going to count as my first stitch. So there's 1, 2 chain here, and then I have my first V that indicates the stitch worked in the previous row. I'm going to yarn over, then skip that V, and insert my hook beneath both legs of the V after it. And yarn over, bring the hook to the front, yarn over, and draw that yarn over through the 3 furthest loops on the hook. Now we're going to keep half double crocheting in every stitch that we see. So first yarn over, then insert the hook beneath both legs of the next V, yarn over, bring the hook to the front, yarn over, and draw the yarn over through the furthest 3 loops. Yarn over, insert the hook, yarn over, bring the hook to the front, yarn over, and draw the yarn over through. When you get to the end of the row, you're going to work your final half double crochet into the top chain that was at the start of the previous row. So here's my 1, 2 chain, and you may need to twist it around slightly to see that. I'll yarn over, then this left leg of the top V is what I'll insert my hook under, and yarn over, bring the hook to the front, yarn over, and draw this through the furthest 3 loops. Then turn your work. Start with the turning chain again, so we'll chain 1, then 2, and then we skip both links of the chain and also the first V, and we're ready to work into this V instead for our first half double crochet stitch. Yarn over, insert the hook, yarn over, bring the hook to the front, yarn over, and draw this yarn through the furthest 2 loops. Yarn over, insert the hook, yarn over, bring the hook to the front, yarn over, draw the yarn over through. Keep doing that all the way to the end of the row. And the final HDC is worked in the top of our previous turning chain. So here's the chain. This left leg of the top V is what I'll insert my hook under after I've made a yarn over. Then yarn over again, bring the hook to the front, yarn over, draw the yarn over through. We're just going to keep repeating this row until we've worked 10 rows of half double crochet stitches in total. Make sure you keep checking your stitches to ensure you always have 71 half double crochet stitches plus a turning chain to make it 72. If you make a mistake, don't forget that you can easily rip back your work to add a stitch where you missed it or take out an accidental extra stitch. Let's count the rows I've worked together so we can see what they look like. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. When you've worked 10 rows, just pull your final stitch nice and big. And we're going to cut our yarn, but make sure we're leaving a tail that's about 70 centimeters or 28 inches in length. Then we're going to fold the top of our flat crochet over towards the inside of the bag and match the final edge up with our first row of half double crochet stitches. Thread your tapestry needle with the very long tail, and then we're going to whip stitch this edge in place to complete 1 drawstring channel. I whip stitch by picking up the back bump of the first HDC with the needle, then pulling it through, and then picking up the first V of the final edge with the needle and pulling it through. Then I move to the next HDC and pick up the back bump with the needle, then pull the needle through, then pick up the next V on the final edge and pull the needle through. I found that this ensures my stitching doesn't show through on the other side of my bag. Keep stitching all the way to the end, and then I just pull my needle off the yarn and leave the remaining tails to weave in later. It's time to make the second drawstring channel, and we're going to start it here at the stitch after our first channel ended. And then we repeat all our instructions from the first channel. We start with a chain 2, then HDC in each of the next 71 stitches, and that should take us to the final stitch before where our first channel started. When you get to the slip stitch from the end of the bag body, just be careful to only work one HDC in each stitch, and pull on the tail connected to the slip stitch if necessary to keep everything at the same tension. If you're really careful with your stitches and you still find that you have a number of HDC other than 71 at the end of the first row, don't worry too much about it. As long as you've got a relatively even split of stitches between the two channels, your bag is still going to look fantastic. The final thing we need to do to finish off the crocheted fabric of this bag is to weave in all our tails on the inside of our bag. If we do the tail from our magic ring first, we can thread it on our tapestry needle and then run the needle behind the back legs of all the stitches around the circle. Then poke the needle up to the next round by passing it behind a few strands of yarn, but also making sure we're not poking it through to the right side of our work. And then run the needle behind the legs of a few more stitches just to make sure things are nice and secure. There's not really a right or wrong way to do this if you want to try a different method of weaving in your tails. You just need to make sure the tails are secured well and that you can't see the yarn on the outside of the bag. Trim off any remaining tail when you're done. To weave in my other tails, I thread them on my needle and use a similar technique of running the needle behind the back legs of a decent number of stitches in the round. Then I skip the last leg my needle passed behind and follow the path back to where I started by going behind the same legs again. I'll pull on the crochet fabric as I go to make sure I'm not causing my stitches to bunch up or flare out. Once all the ends are woven in and trimmed, we can make our drawstring. I'm going to cut 2 lengths of rope, each about 85 centimeters or 34 inches long. You may need a different length of yarn if your bag has turned out larger or smaller than my dimensions, so try to measure the rope against the circumference of the top of your bag before you cut. And you can also use ribbon instead of rope if you prefer. Then I'm going to knot one end on each length of rope and place one of my stitch markers on each knot as well, which will help me get a bit more purchase as I ease the rope through the drawstring channel. Then insert your first drawstring into one of the channels and wriggle it through using the assistance of the knot and stitch marker. You'll then need to insert the drawstring through the second channel as well. Now undo the knot and put the stitch marker aside. Hold the 2 ends of your drawstring together and knot them together. Repeat this process with the second drawstring, but ensure that the ends of the drawstring will meet at the opposite side of the bag to the first drawstring. There we have our beautiful completed bag. If this was your first crochet project, congratulations, and I hope you've had fun with the pattern. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please feel free to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on similar future tutorials. Let me know if you have any questions by leaving them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.